All right, guys. So yesterday, Trump held a rally in New York at Madison Square Garden, and this was, without exaggeration, one of the most unhinged political events that I've seen in my entire lifetime. So I got a bunch of different clips here lined up. We can sort of recap the event. This wasn't the entirety of it. There were a bunch of different speakers. Trump gave a long speech, and so there's a lot that we could get to, but I just want to show you guys some of the things that stood out to me. So here we have Alina Habba, one of the main Trump legal team members, starting us off. Let's go ahead and watch this short little 8-second clip.
You see, I put my MAGA jacket to trigger Hillary Clinton. There you go, Hill.
So there were levels of cringe within this event that I didn't think were humanly possible, but this was a perfect example of that. You guys are still talking about Hillary Clinton. Now, if anybody has subscribed to my channel for any sort of length of time, you'll know that I am a certified Hillary Clinton hater. Now, with that being said, I don't talk about Hillary Clinton on any sort of regular basis because she's not really relevant anymore, right? But to conservatives, she's still the big baddie, right? They want to relive the energy, the excitement, the emotions that they felt in defeating Hillary in 2016. And it just comes off, at least to me, to be a little bit cringe, right? I'm putting my MAGA jacket on the podium to trigger Hillary Clinton. Okay, not the person you're running against, but okay. We move on to this one. Now we have Grant Cardone, who to my best understanding is an internet personality / private equity ghoul. And here he is saying that Mark Cuban, the billionaire who is backing Kamala Harris and sort of campaigning around for Kamala Harris, that he is a simp and that Kamala Harris has pimp handlers, and then finishes this off by saying, quote, "We need to slaughter these other people." Let's go ahead and watch a little bit of this clip here.
No, this is complete gone. Not even her simp, Mark Cuban, can sell this. Even Marky Boy says this would destroy the global economy and take the USA down with it. Ladies and gentlemen, Kamala Harris is the least qualified candidate to ever run for any political office in American history. She makes...
Okay, so let's just respond to that real quick. Now, again, I'm not a fan of Kamala Harris, but the least qualified presidential candidate in history, what are we talking about here? She was a prosecutor, she was an attorney general, she was then a senator, she was then the vice president, and is currently the vice president, and she is the least qualified person to ever run for president versus Donald Trump, whose pre-2016 qualifications were what exactly? That he was like a billionaire con man real estate mogul in New York, or that he was, a host of a popular show, The Apprentice? Like what were Trump's qualifications before any of this? But anyways, they move on here.
She makes her boss look competent. She's
fair.
a fake. I'm not here to invalidate her. She's a fake, a fraud. She's a pretender. Her and her pimp handlers will destroy our country. They will. They've already crippled the dollar, manufactured inflation, imported a virus, censored your voices, funded transgender surgeries, and made empty promises to the middle class for 50 years.
Okay, I don't know about the the transgender surgery aspect of it and the importing a virus aspect of it, but have Democrats largely left behind working class people over the last number of decades along with Republicans? That part, that's true. That's true, right? But you're advocating for Trump. When exactly was Trump a bold fighter for working class people in this country? Was it when he had his major accomplishment of his last administration that was a giant tax cut and a giveaway to billionaires and to corporate interests? Is that him fighting for the working class, him being against a $15 minimum wage, saying that he would veto the PRO Act? Like, where exactly does him being a champion of the lower and middle class come into that equation? But he continues here.
This election has to be more than a victory. It needs to be a landslide. We need to slaughter this other people. We need to bring 100 million votes to Donald Trump.
We need to slaughter these other people. Now, you could give him a generous interpretation and say he means, the more, political terminology here. We need to slaughter them in the election. Okay, that's fine. I would use that same kind of terminology when you're discussing like a football game. Oh, the Lions just slaughtered the Titans last weekend. Okay, I guess we'll let that one slide for now. right? A little bit alarming, but we'll let that one slide for now. Now we move on to some of the more deranged aspects of this. Here we have Rudy Giuliani talking about Palestinians and Israel. Let's watch this absolute psycho shit here.
Hamas is not there for us. Iran is not there for us. They want to kill us. And the Palestinians are taught to kill us at 2 years old. They won't let a Palestinian in Jordan. They won't let a Palestinian in Egypt. And Harris wants to bring them to you. They may have good people. I'm sorry, I don't take a risk with people that are taught to kill Americans at 2. I'm on the side of Israel. You're on the side of Israel. Donald Trump's on the side of Israel. And they're on the side of the terrorists.
Okay, so a lot that you could maybe mention in this, namely, number one, the media ecosystem or the educational systems within Israel, and how people who grow up in Israel are frequently taught to wildly dehumanize Palestinians, right? There is an immense amount of dehumanization that is baked within Israeli society, right? All you have to do to confirm this is to look at some of the social media posts that I've covered on this channel of IDF soldiers inside of Gaza and see how much they care about the Palestinian civilians, right? They do not consider them to be human beings, okay? So that's one aspect that I guess you could respond to. Another aspect, we know that Trump is pro-Israel. This is the same guy who took hundreds of millions of dollars from the Adelson family, for example. And during his last administration, he, moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized their illegal control and occupation of the Golan Heights. He did the Abraham Accords on their behalf, a giant security agreement between Israel and U.S.-backed sort of, monarchies within the Middle East at the expense of Palestinians and throwing them under the rug. We understand that Trump is extremely pro-Israel. This is the guy who told Benjamin Netanyahu to, quote, finish the job as he's in the midst of committing a genocide. So I think we're well aware of all of that. But the core of what Rudy is saying here seems to be that Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party broadly are aggressively pro-Palestine. Huh? What are we talking about here, guys? We're talking about Kamala Harris, the vice president, to the president who has been backing, arming, funding, giving diplomatic cover for the Israeli government to commit a genocide of Palestinians for a year straight now, right? A guy who wouldn't even fathom of restricting or cutting off weapons to this country. So the idea that Democrats are pro-Hamas, they're not even pro-Palestinian in general. There is nothing really more that Joe Biden could have done for Israel other than take the Trump approach where you don't even rhetorically pretend to care about the deaths of thousands and thousands of innocent Palestinian men, women, and children, right? So there we had Rudy Giuliani spouting off this racist nonsense. Now we have Mike Johnson getting in to sort of a fantasy world here, one that I wish was true, but unfortunately is not.
This is not your father's Democratic Party. They are now full on to Marxism and socialism. They don't envision for us to save the founding principles and the greatest nation in the history of the world. Instead, what they envision for us is that we would be some sort of European-style Marxist borderless utopia. We all know that's a dangerous fool's errand.
Okay, I wish, Mike. If Kamala Harris was actually a Marxist, if she was actually a socialist, then I would be her biggest cheerleader, right? That's how you know that this is bullshit, okay? Marxist, socialist, borderless, European-style utopia. Guys, first of all, there are no major European countries that are run by socialists. That just doesn't really exist. I guess what he's talking about is European-style social democracy, where it's a massive threat to somebody like Mike Johnson, the idea that we would have universal healthcare coverage that countries in Europe have that we don't have here in the United States. Is that what he's referring to here? And that's some sort of a dystopian hellscape where Americans wouldn't be bankrupted and ripped off by the millions by private health insurance companies? Is that the hellscape that we're discussing here? Hard to really understand what exactly he means by that. But especially when you're talking about, again, somebody like Kamala Harris, who does not have a Marxist bone in her body. What is Kamala Harris running on? I mean, the most left-wing policy economically that you'll get from Kamala Harris is, well, I think number one, she supports the PRO Act, which is good, right? But then the major flagship agenda items that she's running on are like a tax credit for first-time home buyers or the child tax credit. Like, I think those are both somewhat of a step in the right direction, but to call those Marxist policies as if her platform is centered around socialism, it's not even centered around like Bernie Sanders style, democratic socialism or something like that. Her politics is center right at best on most issues. So again, Republicans living in a fantasy world here that I genuinely wish actually existed. Now we have Vivek Ramaswamy making a pretty bold claim here. Let's listen to this.
I had a friend of mine, smart guy, he's a billionaire, texted me this morning, and he said, why the hell are you guys wasting your time in New York City instead of going to a swing state? You want to know what I told him? I said, welcome to 2024, New York is a swing state.
Okay, so first off, no, it's not. It's just not. If New York flipped red, I would completely upend, I think, mine and everybody in the entire country's understanding of how American electoral politics works, but it's not a swing state, okay? There's approximately like a 0 to maybe a 1% chance that Trump would be able to flip New York to be red. But I think that this gets to a deeper point here, and this is something that Crystal brought up on Breaking Points today. And I think it's a good point, which is that one of the main reasons they're doing a rally like this in New York, which definitively is not a swing state, and they have several other rallies that have been planned or that have been conducted recently that are also taking place not in swing states, is that I think they're kind of trying to sell this narrative, as he literally just did in this clip, that not only is Trump projected to win in November, in a couple weeks now when the election comes up, but he is going to have such an overwhelming victory that even states like New York might be in play. And they're trying to sell this narrative because they're trying to prep their voter base, right? The real hardcore MAGAs, that if Trump loses, the only way that he could have possibly lost is if it was rigged, right? Because not only were we supposed to win, but we were supposed to win states like New York, right? Or New Mexico. We were supposed to win California or whatever the case may be. So they're sort of like drastically overstating how well Trump is going to do in an effort to make it seem unreasonable that he could have ever lost. And this is part of their broader strategy of potentially trying to, do a similar thing to what Trump did back in 2020 and just refuse to admit defeat and see what kind of weaselly ways that they can work their way through the process to try to make him win even when he didn't. Now, the actual polling data I've shown you guys in some of my previous videos before, it's a 50-50 split, right? There's no definitive, favorite in this election. My gut tells me that I think Trump has a decent chance of winning. In fact, if I had to bet between the two, I would say Trump is going to win. But there's I would put it maybe 55% chance Trump wins, 45% chance Kamala Harris wins. It is literally a coin flip at this point. So anybody who is telling you that New York is a swing state, or that Trump is absolutely going to win this election, or that Kamala is absolutely going to win this election is lying to you, okay? There are a whole, slate of different outcomes that could potentially happen, right? You could have Kamala takes Arizona, and then Trump takes Pennsylvania, and then Kamala takes North Carolina, but then Trump takes Nevada, and then Kamala takes Michigan, and Trump takes Wisconsin. You could have a million different scenarios play out in this election, and it's impossible to predict what's actually going to happen. But be aware that this is the kind of narrative that they are trying to prep their base for, that there is no fathomable situation in which Trump legitimately and fairly loses this election. Now we move on to this here. CNN played a sort of montage, a highlight reel here, a low light reel here, of some of the more egregiously racist and inflammatory moments from this night. So they're going to start off with the Kill Tony comedian Tony Hinchcliffe here, and then a couple other guests, and then finishing off with Trump himself. So let's go ahead and watch this clip here. I'll put it down to 1x speed.
These Latinos, they love making babies too. Just know that. They do. They do. There's no pulling out. They don't do that. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. It's a cool black guy with a thing on his head. What the hell is that, a lampshade? I'm just kidding. That's one of my buddies. He had a Halloween party last night. We had fun. We carved watermelons together. It was awesome.
She is some sick Hillary Clinton, huh? What a sick son of a The whole party, a bunch of degenerates.
She is the devil, whoever screamed that out. She is the Antichrist. It's going to be pretty hard to look at us and say, you know what? Kamala Harris, she got 85 million votes because she's just so impressive. As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president.
After those disgusting warm-up acts, Trump then ratcheted up his incendiary, vengeful rhetoric.
I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out. I will rescue every city and town that has been invaded and conquered. And when I say the enemy from within, the other side goes crazy, becomes the sound of, oh, how can he say? No, they've done very bad things to this country. They are indeed the enemy from within. But this is who we're fighting. They're the enemy of the people, the press.
Okay, so number of different things there. Let's start off here with our boy Tony here. Now, listen, there are some people who are saying, oh, he's just telling jokes, right? He's a comedian. Of course, he's going to try to be edgy, etc., etc. Listen, if you're doing your Netflix special, or if you're doing stand-up comedy at a local bar, comedy, center, whatever the fuck, that's one thing, right? You're trying to be edgy. You're making some racist jokes. Okay, that may be appealing to some people. You're at a Trump rally right now in Madison Square Garden. So to sort of like deflect away from the things that you're saying here, saying that Puerto Rico is a giant pile of garbage in the ocean, or making like sort of racist, edgy jokes about how you have a black friend who's in the audience that you picked out and you guys are carving watermelons together instead of pumpkins. It's like, it takes a different character when you're doing this at a Trump rally, because you're not just making like isolated jokes in a vacuum here. The things that you are saying, right, the racism you are being accused of here lines up almost one-to-one with the MAGA agenda. So this isn't like out of place. This is what you think would be appealing to the audience that you're in front of. Now, I guess another thing you could say is like, to me at least, maybe some people disagree with that. Man, these jokes are fucking dog shit. Okay? I see a black guy in the audience, so let's make a watermelon joke. Oh, I'm a genius comedian. That's the bar? That's the bar. Oh, I made a watermelon joke about a black guy in the audience? For real? That's the standard that we're going with here? Oh, you guys are just too triggered. You're too, offended to be able to appreciate the joke. This is lowbrow shit. This isn't even good comedy. I think there's plenty of different, ways that you can make fun of any community in the entire country, right? In the entire world, in a way that is genuinely funny, right? This kind of shit, it's just lazy. It's just lazy. But this is what Tony decided to go with. Now, we'll circle back around to that Puerto Rico joke here in a minute, because CNN did a segment on why that may potentially be impactful and sort of the response to this kind of rhetoric there. Now, we carry on. We also have guys like this. I covered him in a previous thing, but we have guys saying that Kamala Harris is like a demon, or that she's Satan, and trying to frame this entire election as like a battle between good and evil, or a battle between Jesus and God versus the Antichrist. This is where we're at, guys. This is Christian nationalism being given the brightest spotlight that you could possibly imagine in electoral politics in this country. This is how a lot of these people view this. They view it as a clash between, God versus the Antichrist. That's how they view it, and they're openly saying it at these kinds of Then you have Tucker Carlson. You have Tucker Carlson chiming in here, making another sort of like racist joke about Kamala Harris, saying, what did he say? That she's Samoan and Malaysian, sort of trying to make a joke about how Republicans have been saying that Kamala flips her, her ethnicity from black to being Indian to being whatever the case may be, as if like being biracial is an impossibility, as if they've never heard of the concept of somebody being biracial before. Now she's Samoan, now she's Malaysian, and he's making a joke about her IQ as well. Guys, I don't think of myself as like a snowflake, right? I consider myself to have pretty thick skin when it comes to this kind of shit. But like, there is no way to interpret these kinds of statements other than just, it's fucking racist. Of course they're being racist. You're making watermelon jokes about a black guy that you spotted in the audience. You're making jokes about how Kamala is a Samoan/Malaysian because you can't comprehend the concept of somebody being biracial. It's like, it's just openly racist shit, right? And then of course we have Trump finishing off talking about his plan that he wants to deport millions, tens of millions of people from the country. Now, it would be an entire video in and of itself to get into how the fuck would that actually take place? How are you going to identify who's an illegal immigrant or a threat to the peace or whatever the case may be? How are you going to go about rounding up 20 million people from the country and throwing them out? I mean, we are talking about a surveillance state domestically, a police state, a militarized state, the likes of which we have never experienced, okay? This is a nightmare situation, not to mention the economic impacts and the moral impacts that this would have on a country like the United States to deport 20 million people from the country. And so he talks about that plan, and he gets into, the threats against America from within, something that he's mentioned before. I mean, this is a guy who, number one, gets offended when you call him a fascist, even though he calls every single one of his political opponents fascists and communists and Marxists and socialists, etc. But he gets offended at being called a fascist and then turns around and says shit like this about how he wants to use the military to go against his political opponents in this country. There have been some other Republicans in interviews that I've seen when they're asked about this specific rhetoric of using the military against the enemy from within. And these Republicans, when they go on MSNBC or CNN, they deflect away from it. They say, oh, that's not really what he meant. He's talking about, violent, criminal, illegal immigrants who are here. That's who he's referencing as the enemy from within. And then Trump, over and over and over again, keeps emphasizing, no, I actually just mean Democrats. That's what I mean. I want to use the military against Democrats, my political opponent, because I view them as the enemy from within. This is the kind of shit that he's openly saying. Now, again, we circle back here, because those statements from our boy Tony might not have gone over well with some core constituencies that Trump is trying to win the election off of. So here we have Laura Loomer, one of my favorite deranged psycho-conservatives to follow, and she comes up with this conspiracy theory. She says, doesn't anyone think it's weird how Kamala Harris rolled out her policy on Puerto Rico the same day that Tony told a joke at the Trump rally? Here's a timeline of what went down. Early this afternoon, Kamala Harris released a video talking about Puerto Rico. 1 hour later, comedian Tony Hinchcliffe made the joke about Puerto Rico at the Trump rally, where he called it a heaping pile of garbage in the middle of the ocean. Shortly after that, Bad Bunny, one of the largest musicians in the entire world, obviously I think with some influence over, the Hispanic community, the Puerto Rican community. I think he actually is Puerto Rican himself. But he then endorsed Kamala Harris after this rally took place. So fantastic job. You guys are doing great. She says, did you know that Bad Bunny and Tony share the same management label? Did the managers at UTA leak Tony's jokes? And if they did they do so because he's pro? So we now have right-wing conspiracies that the management company that manages Tony Hinchcliffe and Bad Bunny were in sort of like cahoots to make it so that the timing worked out perfectly for Kamala Harris to make her policy about Puerto Rico clear at the same time that Tony's getting up on stage at a pro-Trump rally and making jokes at the expense of Puerto Rico. What are we doing? What are we doing? We can just make up anything now. I mean, this is what I should start doing. You can make up a conspiracy about literally anything, and thousands of people on Twitter will fully buy into it. You don't even really have to try. Now, we do have Republicans responding to some of Tony's jokes here and sort of trying to distance themselves from them. Because again, some of the people he's making fun of are kind of the same people that Trump is trying to make inroads with ahead of the election. So here from Roll Call, Republicans disavow comedian who called Puerto Rico an island of garbage at the Trump rally. So Florida's Scott here said that it's not funny, and it's not true. It's not funny, guys, not funny. Now, to show you, again, why exactly they might be freaking out a little bit about how this entire rally went, here we have on CNN a breakdown of why they may be nervous about some of this.
Why are Republicans so nervous about the comments made at this Trump rally at Madison Square Garden? Well, it's because they targeted the very people in one of the very places that they need the most. I'm talking about the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Remember, Pennsylvania is a place Joe Biden won by just 81,000 votes in 2020. Donald Trump won by just 44,000 votes in 2016. It's close. A joke about Puerto Ricans, okay? In Pennsylvania, there are around 600,000 Latino voters. In Pennsylvania, there are around 300,000 Puerto Rican voters. One thing you will notice about both of these numbers, they are way higher than 81,000. That was the margin in Pennsylvania last time. Pennsylvania has the third highest Puerto Rican population in the country. And it's not just the number, it's where they are in the state. I can put this filter on and I can show you where this population is centered. And I'm going to circle the counties here. The darker the shade you see on this map, the greater the Hispanic population. These three counties here, these two counties here, you'll notice that these counties, 3 went for Joe Biden, 2 went for Donald Trump. They're some of the swingiest in this swing Commonwealth. I'll focus on just a few of them right here. You can see everyone.
So there you go, right? A little bit of the reasoning why Republicans are trying to distance themselves from some of Tony Hinchcliffe's stand-up set there. Because in a swing state like Pennsylvania, you have a significant population of, not just Latino voters, but specifically Puerto Rican voters who, who knows whether or not some significant amount of the population there will be swayed by a joke that was made at a Trump rally, but probably not the best closing message, right? When you're talking about the margins that he's describing there. We're talking about a state that in the last 2 election cycles for president has been decided by a few 10,000 votes here and there. And you have a population of 300,000 just Puerto Rican, voters in Pennsylvania. So, this is a closing message of the Trump campaign. Obviously that's not the entirety of the capsulation of it, but, this is the kind of shit that he's been focusing on recently. It's a bizarre election cycle because in 2016, I think Trump had a very clear narrative, right? When he was running against Hillary, he had the narrative of, we're going to drain the swamp, we're going to build the wall, we are going to fix this broken and corrupt political system that has left you behind, right? And I think that's why he was so effective in that election. Then in 2020, he loses, you have the pandemic, you have the economic crash, et cetera, a whole bunch of other factors that played into that. And then now he's come back, and after January 6th, after losing the last election, refusing to admit that he lost, now his whole campaign is like just vengeful politics. It's just hateful politics. You can even look at the statistical breakdowns on the kinds of ads that Trump and Kamala are running. Trump's ads in swing states are almost exclusively negative, and it's all centered around himself for the most part. I lost the election, right? The election was stolen from me, right? I'm being persecuted by the Department of Justice and by all of these different cases that have been brought against me, right? Everything is about Trump himself personally. And I don't exactly know what kind of narrative he's trying to win on right now. I think, again, if I was going to sort of try to get down to what is the reason for a potential Trump loss and what is the reason for a potential Kamala loss? For Trump, I think it's, again, he's making the politics too vengeful, too spiteful, and too personalized to him, as well as obviously the fact that he helped to overturn Roe v. Wade, and there are some other factors that play into that as well. People are sick of the chaos of a Trump administration. But if Kamala loses, I think it'll be, again, because she didn't break from Biden, okay, and people are looking for a change candidate. You're not making yourself the change candidate. It'll also be because she didn't break from Israel on the current genocide in Gaza with core constituencies that care about that in some of the swing states that Kamala needs to win. And also because she hasn't focused nearly enough on left-wing economic populism, right? At a time where, again, people are struggling to make it by, they're struggling to afford basic life necessities, and they want some big, bold change one way or the other. So there are plenty of reasons that I can justify in my head as to how Trump loses. There are plenty of reasons in my head that I could justify Kamala losing as well. So to me, it's a 50-50 election, which is alarming, right? Again, no fan of the Democrats here broadly, but you look at some of the shit that's being said at one of the largest Trump rallies that has taken place during this election cycle, in the closing moments of the election cycle in Madison Square Garden. And that's the kind of shit that they're talking about.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying